I'm not aware of any credible argument made by any credible international body, legal and otherwise, to say that what Israel is doing is within international law. There are people who hold that view, but the bulk of the people, experts, and these include Jewish experts, many of whom have close association with the Holocaust Foundation, that no longer can
Our guest
support
today is
this.
Dr. Avsel Ashraf, an international relations and security specialist at Loughborough University. Dr. Ashraf, welcome.
Thank you.
Donald Trump meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday night as the push for some sort of ceasefire in Gaza goes on. Both of those leaders seem to confirm they're close to agreeing deals with neighbouring countries to take Gazans who want to leave. Can you see any of the countries in the region signing up to that, or indeed many Palestinians wanting what Mr. Netanyahu calls a better future?
Well, you're right. I can't. That's the short answer. And if any of the countries do, it'll be a form of political suicide, because you see what the people in the region believe. I think with some good reason that we tend to forget, is that they believe that this is a long-term, 70-plus-year campaign of ethnic cleansing at various stages, and what they will do by accepting the refugees would be to assist in that campaign. And of course, many countries did, not willingly, but they accepted millions of refugees, Jordan in particular, Lebanon too. And that didn't work out too well at all, partly because the PLO misbehaved, but also they've seen that those refugees become permanent residents. They're never going to go back, and they can't see now more than before any chance of a two-state solution. And it's almost a verbally endorsed policy by the Israelis that there is no such thing as a two-state solution anymore. So I think that would be a very, very unwise move politically. I think what this issue is being framed as is a sort of it's a bit of a sop, and I think it's being presented to two sides differently. Netanyahu has said that nobody has to leave, but if they want to leave, they should be allowed to leave. And of course, we've had some people repatriated. Well, that's probably the wrong word, but allowed to go for medical treatment abroad in neighboring countries such as Jordan. And I think that sort of thing might be used as a sop for the for those who want to show that there is some form of expulsion, whereas actually that's hopefully going to be a way of people leaving in order to be able to come back at some future stage. And that's one of those issues, the repatriation of refugees from over 70 years ago remains one of the prerequisites for a two-state solution.
Israel's defense minister set out plans earlier on Monday for what he called a humanitarian city, a sort of internment camp where Palestinians could enter but not leave on the ruins of Rafah. Some are warning that could be a war crime, or even, as you suggested, neighbouring countries might say ethnic cleansing. What's your view of this plan from Israel Katz?
Well, I think it's there's a lot of political posturing going on. I think people want to be seen domestically. There's a constituency, a very large and growing constituency in Israel, that wants to be rid of the Palestinian problem as they see it. I mean, one of the things that people skirt around is the fact that many people, the right-wing extremists, as they're sometimes loosely called, have a vision of a greater Israel which goes beyond the current borders, not just the including Gaza and even the West Bank. And that is what people are trying to work towards, and they see this as their best opportunity for almost a century to get that. So I think that when you say many people are saying this is illegal against international law, well, I think that's almost almost like a cynical view, really, anymore, to look at it, talk about international law, given what has happened. Now, of course, the Israeli army will say they're the most moral army in the world, and I'm sure you're going to have to repeat that mantra in the interest of balance. But in the interest of balance, of course, you have to weigh up the credibility and evidence of the arguments on both sides, and certainly. I'm not aware of any credible argument made by any credible international body, legal and otherwise, to say that what Israel is doing is within international law. There are people who hold that view, but the bulk of the people, experts, and these include Jewish experts, many of whom have close association with the Holocaust Foundation, that no longer can support this. And I think in that case, we have to deal with some of these claims, particularly from Israeli politicians, with skepticism, and that's the politest way I think I can put it.
Even as we are skeptical about what these pronouncements might be, who those pronouncements are intended for, we are hearing more and more details of the chaos and lawlessness inside Gaza. That death toll around the aid distribution points run by Israel and a US-backed foundation keeps going up. Is it inevitable that law and order breaks down in a conflict zone like Gaza, or could this be by design?
Well, I believe it is by design. It's pretty obvious by design. The evidence is overwhelming. You see, this is an administration that has allowed food to be cut off for well over 6 weeks. It had said at the outset, over a year ago, that it was its intention to cut off fuel and food and water, and it did that. It was 100% blockade of fuel and water and electricity. And what it's done now is replace 400 distribution points, which were dotted around the country, with initially 4 and now, I believe, 6. Now, you don't have to be a mathematician to work out the fact that it's going to be almost impossible for a large number of people, many of whom are amputees, others are sick, others are infirm by other means, to even get to those food distribution points. And then on top of that, you've got the IDF whistleblower saying we have orders to shoot unarmed civilians. You have the ironically named Gaza Humanitarian Foundation saying, or whistleblowers from there saying that my colleagues are shooting inappropriately at civilians, and so I think it's beyond parody, to be honest. This is, out of 1984, to use those terms like the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It is, by all evidence, nothing to do with humanitarianism. It is using humanitarianism as a cloak to carry out the genocide, as many people claim it is, and it's intended, and it's working not just in terms of the obvious, people being shot, people starving, but what it is doing, and it's been reported several times but not made much of, it is continuing the project to prevent a future generation from taking place. And what we're seeing now, of course, is one of the things that is banned, and I believe is still not being distributed, is baby formula. And you've got mothers who are unable to produce breast milk and children who have no alternative, who are actually literally starving to death. And if they do survive, they will never survive physically and mentally in a state to be able to contribute to society effectively. So this is, I'm afraid, to answer your question directly, it is a well thought out strategy, and it has been very effective for the last 50, 60 years because it's been done in a drip feed fashion. Nothing we see happening today to any large extent is different from what has happened in the past. It's just the intensity with which it is happening now. And so I think we have to wake up to the facts, and we have to wake up to the fact that it isn't just a universally accepted policy within Israel. If you read the Haaretz newspaper, which I occasionally do, there is so much criticism, so much intelligent debate going on in Israel itself, albeit amongst a minority, that we don't see reflected in this country. And that is something to think about as journalists in the UK. Why can't we question this thing from a neutral point of view? We don't have to take sides, and I don't take sides. Hamas have done appalling things. Many other Palestinian political and military factions have done appalling things. So we can call those out without any fear. Why can't we do that when it's happening on an industrial scale in front of our very eyes? And this is it's more than a humanitarian issue. It's a really important issue for the UK, for the USA, because its power, which is largely based on moral authority, is being exploited and weakened as a result of this.
Another issue that's controversial in Israel is Israel's Prime Minister admitting that he's arming some of these clans or militias, particularly one run by Yasser Abu Shabab. Mr. Netanyahu says that's no big deal. He's happy to send weapons to Gazans who are opposed to Hamas. Is it a big deal? Is it normal practice in these sort of conflicts to send weapons in to the enemy of your enemy?
Well, it's normal practice for Israel. It's been doing it for a very long time. And the only difference here is that we must thank and compliment Prime Minister Netanyahu for being honest about this. He's done this in the past. Hamas was assisted by Israeli governments to come into existence, and anybody who's looked at this in any detail, because the moment it looks like a Palestinian leadership is moving away from violence, which obviates the need, the excuse of doing things under security, as happened with the PLO. PLO laid down its arms and said, right, we'll move to a peace process. So suddenly they needed an alternative, and Hamas was there on the scene. And this is, again, another very cynical ploy. If you take a bunch of thugs, criminals, and then say, hey, boys, have some fun. Here's some weapons to help you. And if you want, we can give you a bit of money as well. Just go and enjoy yourself. You've got an entirely vulnerable population there. Get on with it. And what I think it's a slightly more sophisticated strategy than the one I'm painting in many ways, in that what do Hamas do? Do they try to restore order and law, which is what they've been trying to do with varying degrees of success and effectiveness, in which case, of course, they divert their attention from fighting the Israelis to fighting these people, and in that way they expose their positions, they expose their people, so the Israelis can target them as well. So it's a well thought out strategy on a number of fronts from a purely amoral point of view. But when you look at it from any, even the minimum vestige of ethics and morality, you've already got a hugely vulnerable population, and you're trying to, say to the world, we're giving them the bare minimum of humanitarian assistance. You are also, if they can survive the shootings and the bombings on the way there, and if they can actually make the journey in the first place, on the way back, they're going to be mugged by these armed criminals, as many have been and reported to have been. So what we've got there is an unashamedly cynical situation. And again, it's one that if it had been any other country, if Putin had been doing this, we would have been all over the shop with this. And for some reason, because of our historic ties with Israel and so on, people are just saying tut-tut and moving on to the next horror.
Do we know much about Yasser Abu Shabab and his Popular Forces group?
I personally don't know a great deal, and I think what there is available on the internet, one of the reasons I haven't looked at it too much, There's this conflict, more so than any other, is full of a very sophisticated level of what we might kindly call information management. So I'll give you an example which is unrelated but illustrates the point I'm making. I've forgotten the name of the village, but a village in Lebanon was before it was attacked. It was described on Wikipedia as a site of great historical interest. And just a few days before it was attacked as a stronghold of Hezbollah, the site was changed to say it was a stronghold of Hezbollah, and people on the site were saying, "What's the basis of this change?" etc., etc. And of course, when journalists like yourself, who might not know the area very well, do the research that you'd expect to do, you will come across that and you will say, "Oh yes, it's a stronghold of Hezbollah. It verifies what the Israelis are saying." And the same thing about people like or individuals involved in Hamas and elsewhere, and indeed even this group of thugs, criminals you're talking about. They're just criminals as far as I'm aware. They haven't got any kind of political background, even an extreme one. And so whatever is out there on that individual is not likely to be very reliable. And it's very likely, in my experience, having looked at ideologues for over 25 years in the terrorism world, a lot of these things are constructed either by the individuals themselves. I don't think that's the case in this case, or by others who want to paint a particular picture of them. I think for the intents and purposes of our analysis, they're criminals, they're being armed by Israel, and they're causing mayhem.
Israeli media suggests that perhaps some of the other clans are linked to Fatah, the group that rules the occupied West Bank. Could this all be linked to that long-time rivalry between Hamas and Fatah?
I think there is undercurrents of that for sure. There is that continuation of that competition, political competition. I don't think there is any strategic need for that. Now, if you look at the way the Palestinian Authority, the legal representatives of Palestine have been behaving throughout this conflict, they have not been supportive of Hamas at all.
You've worked in the armed forces on strategy for many years. What's your sense of how Israel may be cooperating with these armed groups? What kind of cooperation do you think they'll have with Abu Shabab and the other clans?
I think they've got a working level of cooperation that's built on a very detailed understanding of the group's vulnerabilities and needs. And right now, of course, all those groups are in great need, but personally, their families may be injured, ill, and Israelis can say, okay, well, we'll allow your particular family out for treatment. They will know that these particular people need a little extra food and say, well, okay, well, we'll arm you, you can go and nick the food and stuff like that. So there is it's a utilitarian cooperation. There's no ideological, even halfway ground there. And intelligence agencies of all countries, including ours, have been past masters at exploiting criminal gangs for their national interest. It's not a difficult thing, and criminals by their very nature are very easy to exploit because they have some very basic needs. They're not ideologically driven. They're very flexible morally and ethically. And if you press the right buttons, you'll get what you want. You can buy, if you like, what you want in some ways. And that doesn't necessarily have to be in the form of cash.
With Abu Shabab not ruling out a civil war and Hamas leaving a power vacuum, seemingly faltering in Gaza, how do you see this playing out in the coming months?
Well, I see that this is an issue that potentially, and I feel the Israelis would like this as their plan B if they are forced to pause their plan to completely overwhelm and take over Gaza, that this is their plan B, to leave it in a state, an ungovernable state. It's physically completely destroyed. There isn't an institutional building that I know of, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a school, whether it's I understand all the universities have been destroyed. There are most of the domestic accommodation has been destroyed, the infrastructure has been destroyed, and any hope for political unity, I'm sure they wish to be destroyed through these means. And what I hope that, none of us can predict the future, but what I hope this episode has done is focus the Palestinian people, and all the evidence suggests that they are now focused on unity, and they are now focused on political means for doing what they've done, because the success of the Palestinians throughout this conflict has not been based on anything Hamas has done of any significance. It's been based on the resilience in what a lot of people across the world believe to be inspirational bravery of a group of people who have not succumbed under the most unimaginable pressure, physical, emotional, and psychological. And there is a great deal of psychological illness that needs to be addressed as well. But despite all of this, they're there. And I think they're not easily going to allow political parties from within to try and be the new spoilers. Now, what I think there is a great important role for the Palestinian authority to play in all of this, the legitimate government as far as the UN is concerned for Palestinian people. And also, I think that Palestinian Authority has also stood up in the last couple of years and become pretty dignified and sophisticated in the way it's done its politics. And I think if countries like the United Kingdom and many European countries, some have already done so, recognize the state of Palestine, that will strengthen the authority, which is committed to peace, it's committed to political solutions, negotiations, and the like. We can do a lot to obviate what I know the enemies of the Palestinians want, and that is anarchy. They want disorganization. They want the Palestinians to be infighting so that they can control the extremities. And that is something I don't think 99% of the Palestinians want either. So I think I'm hopeful. I wouldn't say optimistic. I'm hopeful that those plans to divide and rule will not work.
Dr. Avsel Ashraf from Loughborough University, thank you very much.
Pleasure.